Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another amazing day at the Pet Lover Summit. I have a wonderful guest speaker here with us today, Dr. Odette Suter, or is it Suter?
Either way.
Come on. Dr. Odette is talking today about the 7 pillars of pet health, a paradigm shift in medicine. Dr. Odette, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure and my honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me to talk to your people here. It's always nice to talk to like-minded people.
I love it, all our pet lovers, and I am looking forward to hearing all about the 7 pillars of pet health. I love that the paradigm shift word. I love that phrase, paradigm shift, because things have been happening very quickly, I think, for humanity and animals to the better, for the better. And I'm so excited to hear about the 7 pillars of pet health.
Yeah, we definitely are in a paradigm shift for sure on a big scale, but yes, especially in medicine, certainly, because we have shifted from more infectious diseases to chronic diseases, where people used to die of cholera or, whatever bug was floating around. Now people and animals are dying of chronic diseases, diabetes, cancer, IBD is a big issue. Allergies are a big issue. So everything is focused a little bit, has shifted to more chronic diseases, and conventional medicine has very little when it comes to chronic diseases. They're really good as the emergency sort of system. If the fire is burning, if a dog has pneumonia and is about to die, we hit them with antibiotics and we get them to survive. But with chronic diseases, there's very little available for animals. And that's why a lot of people are now shifting towards more of the holistic approach, because they're realizing that all of these traditional drugs, conventional drugs that we have are more like a Band-Aid and don't really fix the problem. And oftentimes even they, stop working after a while. So people are kind of looking for different answers. And that's really good, because it's good to be open and looking for something new and something a little bit more natural. And just in general, with this paradigm shift, we're kind of moving back more towards nature, because we humans have been experimenting quite a bit on this planet. And we're realizing that that whole experimenting has sort of led us to a place where we're either going to make it or not. And we're sort of pinned against the wall. And that pinning against the wall is necessary for any type of shift, because we humans don't change very well unless we have a little bit of pressure. I mean, I know it from myself. If I don't have a little bit of a deadline for something, nothing much is happening. So we humans, we need a little bit of, push. So that's what's happening. And it's a beautiful thing. Of course, in the process, there's also a lot of pain that surfaces and a lot of, damage that's showing up. But if we step back a little bit, it's really a beautiful thing, because we can really step into something completely new, because we're all realizing, or at least many of us, that the old isn't working. And so it's a really amazing time to be alive.
Woohoo!
I know, right? Yeah.
Beautiful. That is so well said. I love that. And I think it's pretty typical for humanity for us to need a good kick in the ass to change. And our animals are right along for the ride with us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they are big catalysts, because animals are our hearts, basically. So with the animals not feeling well, it's really pushing a lot of us beyond what we were comfortable with, and looking at new things entirely, and going down some rabbit holes, basically, that we've never explored. And so they're amazing catalysts for that, because they give us so much love and such unconditional affection, and they don't judge us and all of that. So for most of us, they're like a lifeline. And so without our lifeline, we feel like we're dying. So if we feel like we're dying, we kick into survival mode and we try to fix the problem, which that really opens up the world for a lot of people, you know, in a new way. And
yeah.
so
And can you tell me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were saying that, you know, a lot of animals are now dying of chronic conditions. Are the chronic conditions now because of lifestyle?
Well, I mean, there are two different things that cause disease. One of them is a deficiency of something.
Okay.
That, you know, won't allow the cells to function properly. And the other is toxicity. And right now we have both going on. So we have deficiency of nutrients because the soils are depleted. We are growing monoculture. We're feeding them junk food diets that are highly processed. Animals are being used as landfills. So basically whatever is not being used in the human field and what can't be consumed by humans is being put into the animals, into the animals' food. So they get really poor diets. So as a result, they become really deficient. But at the same time, they're also being intoxicated because we're spraying so much stuff everywhere, you know, Roundup being one of those. We have GMO foods, we have, you know, high carb diets and highly processed diets. So not only are they deficient, but they're also toxic because carbohydrates at high levels are inflammatory. So they cause inflammation in the body. And fats and carbohydrates are also, through the processing aspect, being turned into carcinogenic substances, you know, chemicals basically that then cause, you know, cancer and other, you know, chronic diseases. And so that's a little bit what's happening. And because of that deficiency and that excess, then the cells cannot function properly. And that's really what disease is cells that are not functioning properly.
Okay.
So they can be malfunctioning in the sense that the pancreas isn't working and they could have diabetes. It could be the cells of the skin that are malfunctioning, you know, resulting in more allergies. It could be the liver that's malfunctioning, you know, the cells of the liver, and that as a result, it's not, the process of detoxification is limited. So we have all sorts of different cells that can malfunction, and each animal will have a little bit of a variation of it depending on what their weak link is. But in the end, it's malfunctioning of cells.
That all makes sense to me. You are speaking my language, and I'm so excited to bring this information to everybody who is watching. So how do we get started with the 7 pillars of health?
Well, first we need to figure out a bit what's wrong and what's not working properly. So we always have to ask the question of why, because oftentimes we see a symptom and, you know, we reach for like a special shampoo or whatever it may be that we think is going to help, but that's more of like a little band-aid that we're just putting on the body, and it's not really fixing the underlying cause. So I always start with doing some proper diagnostics to find out, you know, what is going on. And then once I know that, then I build up a plan to help the animal. But the basic, you know, 7 pillars that you mentioned are what I use in my practice because they're really essential for the body, and everybody needs those. And that's not just for our animals, that also applies, you know, just as much. So.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the 7 pilars?
So the pillar number 1 is nutrition, because in order for the cells to be able to function properly, they need to get the nutrients necessary to be built, you know, because if you don't have good nutrition, it's like trying to build a house out of cardboard, you know, at the first rain, it just starts to shrivel up. Or in Chicago, it gets blown away. So in order to create healthy cells, we need to supply the body with healthy nutrients. And I always tell people that if you're feeding your animals or yourself as close as possible to what they or we would eat in nature, then the cells actually get the nutrients in order to be healthy. So the further we stray away from what we would get in nature, the more sick we're going to get. And for dogs and cats, that's, you know, dry kibble, highly processed, high carb junk food. And for us, it would be like eating at McDonald's, our whole life. So if you were to think about that, I mean, that's insane. Nobody would do that, eating at, one of the junk food places or fast food their whole life. But we're doing it with our animals, which that's the biggest aspect that we need to change, because no animal is meant to be eating highly processed food. No cell is made to be functioning properly on highly processed food. It's just impossible. So that's the first step, is to get them on a diet that's healthier, that's made from fresh foods, preferably organic, grass-fed, like sustainably farmed, all of that. Because as we're voting with our money and getting good food, we're also helping to support our planet, because unless we take care of our planet, we cannot make good food. So
true. That's really
important. So so that's the first pillar, is to get nutrition into shape. And, that can be a little bit different for an individual. Some older dogs, for example, they may not do as well on a raw diet as a younger dog, so we do have to take that into consideration. And especially for our cats, for example, they have to eat. You can't force them to eat something they don't want to eat, because they're going to starve themselves to death. They'd rather do that, and then they can get really sick to the point of needing to be hospitalized. So definitely.
Oh my gosh.
They can start mobilizing a lot of fat, and that then causes hepatic lipidosis, which is basically life-threatening. So cats, you cannot do that. You can't fast cats. You have to make sure they eat. But there are ways to kind of trick them. It may take a few months, but you kind of have to work with them on that. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two would be the gastrointestinal tract, because that's where food is being, absorbed. Well, first broken down and then absorbed through the cells into the body so that it can nourish the cells. So if the gastrointestinal tract is not healthy, then no matter what food we put in, it will not be absorbed quite as well. And the gastrointestinal tract is where a lot of inflammation starts because of leaky gut. So the gastrointestinal tract has a lining that is just one layer thick on the inside. And these cells are supposed to be really close together, so no gaps between the cells. But when we have things that cause inflammation and damage to the gut lining, what happens? These cells start to separate, and then we have holes where things can go through that shouldn't go through, including microbes, food particles that are not fully digested, that sort of thing. And that then causes inflammation in the entire body and causes, is a huge contributor and almost like a cause of that chronic inflammation that we see in so many animals these days. So anytime there is chronic inflammation, we need to fix the gastrointestinal tract, because gut health has been associated with pretty much 99% of all diseases, really.
Right. That's huge.
Run over by a truck or something, that's a different story. But most diseases, including cardiovascular disease in humans, autoimmune issues, food sensitivity, allergies, cancer, all of those have some kind of origin in the gastrointestinal tract. And that's not really new knowledge. Even Hippocrates, 400 BC, knew that. He was coined the father of medicine. So he even knew that death begins in the colon.
Right.
So there's definitely a huge importance there. And then in the recent, a couple of decades, there's been a lot of research done on the microbiome, which is basically the assortment of all the different microbes that we have in the gut, including viruses, bacteria, protozoa, parasites, etc. And all of these little microbes are really hugely important for health. So I know that with the pandemic and all of that, we've been kind of on a war path with, trying to kill all the microbes, but they're really the ones that are going to keep us healthy and save our lives.
Right.
So we absolutely have to make friends with microbes. And I always joke because we always are so concerned about microbes, but all you have to do is to go into a public bathroom and flush, and then you have this spray of microbes in the air.
Yeah.
You're lacking microbes and you can't find a fecal donor to do a fecal transplant, just go to the airport and you'll get plenty of microbes that way. So I know I'm going to gross out a bunch of people, but as pet parents, we're already grossed out because a lot of our pets are eating other animals' poops, and that's actually a really good thing. Obviously, it depends a little bit. If they're eating poop from a dog that has an unhealthy microbiome, that's not as good as if it was from a healthy, donor dog.
Right.
But people always ask me, well, how can I stop my dog from eating poop? And I'm like, don't. Fix the gut. If there's an imbalance, work on that.
They're self-medicating.
Yeah, exactly. They're self-medicating. And I do have clients who, they have multiple dogs, and one dog will, only select the poop from one other dog, not from the others. So they're very selective as far as what they need. They're very good at knowing what they need. But basically, the microbes of the gut, they outnumber the body by a factor of 10. And then from a genetic perspective, by a factor of 150. So I always ask the question, who's running the show here? Right? It's the microbes. So without the microbes, we are nothing, basically, because they affect everything. They affect brain development. And that's probably in part why we see so many behavior issues in dogs, because they start out with a poor microbiome, which then does not allow for good development of the brain as far as learning and memory and emotions go. And so if that development of the brain doesn't happen within the first few months of their lives, like 3-4 months old, they will never develop a brain that will function as well as it could, if they hadn't had a good microbiome to start with.
Right. That's huge.
Yeah, it's incredibly huge. And we, unfortunately, because of our practices on this planet, we have lost about 50% of the diversity of these microbes. And the good thing about microbes is, it's not like there's good ones and bad ones necessarily. It's more about the distribution and the diversity. So the more different microbes you have, the healthier the body can be. And these microbes, they make vitamins, they make neurochemicals, they make melatonin, serotonin, all of these things that also help the brain to function properly. They have a huge educational function when it comes to the immune system. So they basically modulate the immune system. So it's able to recognize what is self and what is foreign. And so when we have a lack of these microbes and a break in these barriers, like the gastrointestinal tract, then we sort of lose that self versus non-self. And that's where disease then also, kind of originates. So yeah, gut health is incredibly, incredibly important. So if you do nothing else, fixing the gut will give you so much bang for your buck, basically. And you may not necessarily see it right away. If you have a healthy animal, you may not be able to necessarily tell the difference when you're working on gut health, but your animal may live longer as a result, have less disease in that process. But, that's something that we can't really foresee. But certainly it sets them up for a healthier life, for a better potential. So those are the two foundational pillars, really. And then once the gastrointestinal tract and nutrition are in shape, I usually start working on detoxification a bit, but I want to make sure that the animal is receiving all the nutrients it needs, and it can also eliminate toxins, because if we start the detox process too early, then these toxins will just be reabsorbed through these holes in the gut lining. and then we basically re-intoxicate the animal. So it's very
Right.
important that we get these things out. But we can already do a lot with detoxification even before we even change nutrition. I mean, just changing nutrition is removing the burden of toxins, because it's not just about getting the toxins out, it's also preventing more toxins to go in. And there's a lot that we can do, but I know there's also a lot that we don't have much control over, because nowadays 70 to 90% of all air and water samples have glyphosate in it, which is the active ingredient of Roundup, and Roundup is very toxic. It basically blocks detoxification, it blocks the liver, it kills the microbes in the gut, and I mean, it does so much. Yeah, it's pretty awful what it does. So anyways,
Right. And it's a carcinogenic.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means it causes cancer, for those of you that aren't aware.
Yeah. So it's very important that we just limit the amount of toxicity that they're exposed to. And that starts in the house. It starts with, being smart about vaccines, eliminating some of these toxic preventatives, switching over to household cleaners that are non-toxic, that are biodegradable, getting rid of all the plug-in, scented things, the scented candles, making sure the air is clean, the water is clean, getting it filtered properly. So
air freshener.
Yeah, those are anything that smells and is not natural, as in, coming from a plant and high quality, you just want to get rid of. But even so, with any sort of scented things, I'm always a bit on the fence, because animals have such a sense of smell. And if I'm tortured by something, even if it's natural, then I can't even imagine how the animals are feeling about it. Yeah. So anyway, so that would be for detoxification, eliminating as much as possible. Obviously, we all live in a polluted world. So, one other way that we can help with that elimination is by shopping in a smart way. No strawberries from Australia or Chile in the middle of winter, because that obviously contributes to pollution. Getting water that you're filtering so that you don't have all the plastic that ends up in the ocean. One thing that I was really surprised about was that fleece clothing is basically a microplastic that then ends up in the water supply.
Oh
no! Getting a little smart on these types of things. Yeah, I didn't know either, but obviously since then I haven't bought any fleece anything. So there's a lot of smart things that we can do, and sure, it's a little inconvenient, but unfortunately, if
it's worth it.
It's going to get a lot more inconvenient if we don't do something about it.
That's true.
Yeah, so detoxification, and then obviously we can also support the liver and kidneys in detoxification. We can use binders and things like that. So detox is basically then the third pillar. And then the fourth pillar of health is hormones, because hormones are like the biochemical communication system in the body. And if we don't have enough hormones, nothing works properly. And as women, especially, we know all about it. If our hormones are off balance, then we kind of get like, the claws come out, or the hot flashes, or whatever it may be. So for animals, just the same. A lot of animals nowadays have adrenal insufficiency, which that affects how the immune system works. And a lot of animals then will have an overactive immune system that then shows up as allergies. So the adrenal glands, that's important. And then the thyroid glands, they can be affected as well with hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. Hyper for dogs, hyper for cats. So we have to make sure that we also get these hormones in balance, because without those, nothing really works, especially hypothyroidism. If the metabolism is slowed down, because that's what the thyroid hormone is for, it's basically regulating the speed at which biochemical processes occur. If that's slowed down, then everything gets sluggish, and it's kind of like trying to bake a cake at 150 degrees. Not much is going to happen. It's just going to still stay that little jiggly liquid. I mean, it could be quite tasty depending on the ingredients, but if you're expecting a cake, you're not going to get that. So
Right.
for the animal's body as well, for the cells, in order to function properly, they have to have enough thyroid hormone, for example.
Sure.
So that's
Okay.
one of the communication systems. And then the other communication system, which is the next pillar, would be the nervous system, because that one sends electrical input to different areas of the body, muscles, tendons, ligaments, fascia, skin, internal organs, etc. And then we also have information that's coming back up to the brain. And we also have external information and information from memory and beliefs as well. So it's very important that that works properly as well, because with nerves, I always tell people that if you're not getting enough nerve input into a muscle, for example, then the joint will become unstable, and that will result in arthritis down the road. And nerves are a bit like a water hose. When you step on the water hose, there's no water coming. As soon as you take the foot off the water hose, you have water again. And with the nervous system, it's the same. And it's very easy. I use chiropractic work for the most part, but I can have a dog that has lacking nerve input into the hind legs and is kind of dragging a little bit. If I can tweak them right, then by the time we're done, they have better function in the hind end.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and same for organs too. I remember a cat who was having some kidney issues, was an older cat, and I did chiropractic work on her, especially the innervation to the kidneys themselves. And the next day I got an email from the owner saying that the spot where she peed, which was much smaller than it usually is, which means that the kidneys had better function again.
Awesome.
Obviously, it didn't reverse the disease, but at least I was maximizing what's there. And it's basically looking at the nervous system is my go-to, because if you have a problem there, you're never going to have good function of the body. And it's such a foundational piece that's so easy to tweak. So that's always where I go first. And then if it doesn't, resolve what I think it should, then I go deeper, because it tells me that there's more and not just that. But yeah,
right.
The nervous system is so important. Any sort of GI issues, reflux, IBD, diarrhea. My sister's cat just had diarrhea. It was awful smelling, really disgusting. And I just did a little bit of a tweaking of his nervous system. And the next day he didn't poop. And then the day after, it was much better form. It still smelled. So there was still more to go, but just tweaking that nervous system a little bit made a huge difference for this
That's
cat.
Amazing.
Yeah. So very important.
Okay.
And I have a couple more pillars. So the next one, fitness and exercise would be the next one, which is kind of like a wonder drug. I have to admit that when I first came to the US some 20-some years ago, I was really shocked at how little exercise animals were actually getting here and how much they were alone. I mean, obviously in the last 2 years, things have changed a little bit. The level of exercise that they were getting is just so minimal. I mean, obviously it doesn't go for all animals, but I had to actually, with my childhood dog, I had to go walk her 365 or 66 days a year, rain or shine. And I'm from Switzerland, where it was not always pleasant. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha.
But she still got her hours walk every day. And she lived to 16 or so. But in any case, exercise is like a wonder drug. You can save a lot on supplements and all sorts of other things if they have good, sufficient amount of exercise. And they will also be balanced mentally much more. And then, when you do some research on fitness and exercise for dogs, what always comes up is how much healthier people are if their animals are getting exercise.
Yes.
They're doing so many studies on dogs and humans. And, when they get exercise, how much better their hearts are and everything else. So exercise.
Gotta walk the dog.
Yeah, it's just absolutely crucial. And I think it's also really important to go different places, nature preserves, different areas, because again, there are different microbes in different areas. And if they can roll around in the dirt, they will also ingest some of these microbes, and that will also help to replenish their gastrointestinal tract.
Love it.
And that goes for the little Chihuahua and little miniature Yorkshire Terrier and all of these. They still also need exercise, even though they're little. They need as much exercise as a big dog, and some even more than that. So, take them outside, go out in nature and communicate with nature a bit. So anyway, so that's pillar number 6, and then pillar number 7 is mental and emotional health. For humans, probably more so than for the animals, although animals certainly have mental and emotional issues as well, but oftentimes it's really what they pick up from us humans. So it's important that we kind of work our own process and examine our own behavior and mental and emotional health, so that we can then help them, because they can sniff out when we're stressed out, and as a result, they get stressed out as well. That's really crucial, especially nowadays where everybody is a little more stressed, because again, we're kind of pinned against that wall, and so our survival instincts are in full function.
Yes, and when the humans are doing better, the animals are always doing better.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So that's the 7 pillars, right?
Yeah, that's 7.
That's amazing, and I love that it all translates to our human existence as well, because we could all benefit from these 7 pillars.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, that's how I got to it, is because of my own health.
You did?
Yeah. Because I had a lot of chronic issues myself, even though I grew up pretty healthy. We had an organic garden and we lived out in the country and all of that, but I still ended up with chronic fatigue and some autoimmune issues. And it wasn't, I started to kind of piecemeal the different things. I did a lot of emotional, mental, working on myself at some point. And then I did more acupuncture and Chinese herbs. And then I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it wasn't until I put all the pieces together that it actually then made the difference. So it's really not so much, well, I think the most important part is to put the pieces together and not just do one at a time, because it took me about 10 years to get out of my chronic issues. And dogs and cats and horses, they don't have that kind of time. So you really have to apply all of them, pretty much at the same time. Obviously, you start with detox a little bit after you have boosted the system a little bit and created a little bit of balance. And obviously, it also depends a little bit on the age of the animal and where they're at. But it's really important to put all of these pieces together.
That's beautiful. And you've done that for us beautifully today, Dr. Odette. I appreciate you so much. And I'm so grateful for all the knowledge that you have imparted on us. Please tell the audience, where can they find you? What is your website?
So my website is OdetteSuterDVM.com. Odette with 2 T's and Suter with 1 T. I'm assuming.
And there'll be a link below. And how, excuse me. And how about the free gift that you have for everybody today? You want to talk about that? There's also a link below for that as well. Yeah.
So I do have like a summary of that 7 pillars of health, a paradigm shift in medicine for all of you guys. And I talk a little bit about my story, and then also how you can dig in deeper, because I have a whole program, because nowadays with that lack of veterinary care, and especially holistic vets are harder to come by, I've decided to go more into educating people and giving them a really good foundation so that they can apply these 7 pillars of health, and also provide them with continued support through online, live Q&As every week, so that they really get that support, and wherever they are in the world, as long as they have a computer or internet somehow. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for everything that you've brought to us today. Dr. Suter, we appreciate you and we thank you so much for being here on the Pet Lover Summit.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And thanks to everybody who's making such a difference with our animals, because I always say we're a village and it takes all of us.
It's huge.
No matter how small you think your little pebble is that you're throwing in the pond, all the pebbles together make a huge difference. So
that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for all the beautiful work you're doing.